Hi everyone, Ted Simpson here, certified Bob Ross instructor, and I'm doing another voice-over video today rather than recording my audio live here. Um, did a bunch of paintings all in a row last week and just didn't have time to narrate as I was painting, so you get me a little bit after the fact. So as you can see, I'm putting a little bit of yellow ochre across the center of a pre-primed stretch canvas already coated with a layer of that liquid white. Like Bob always said, gets the canvas slick, gets it wet, gets it ready to blend and mix color right on the canvas. And that's what I'm doing here, throwing some color up, sort of feathering some upward so it's not so boringly flat type sunset. This is a version of Nick's painting that he did for Bob's Unfinished Season 32. And I was looking at this painting the other day, and I really like how Nick highlighted those evergreens near the end, right? So I zoomed in and I was just looking at the picture, and I accidentally took a screenshot of the zoomed in picture. And I know it sounds crazy, but the what it took was an awesome zoomed in version of the painting. It sort of like cut uh, 2/3 of the painting off and just had this one spot on the right side. Like, you know what? I think that could be a painting. So I immediately put my stuff down and got my camera ready and decided to paint a version of this that's sort of I don't know, what should I call it? Edited or truncated or portion of the picture, a screenshot. So that was the reason why I'm doing this one. And after a little bit of that bright red, now I'm using alizarin crimson, and both of these reds will pink up quite a bit the more you work into that liquid white. And of course, if you had a lot of liquid white to start, it blends even more. So there's always a balance going on between how much liquid white and how much sky color you're putting in. You can see with that alizarin crimson, I'm adding little tiny bits of phthalo blue to purplize it, putting all sorts of different colors happening in the sky with a little bit of a, kind of see some brush marks, some angles here that I'm working in, just to give it a little more character, a little more variety in the sky. And you can see I'm pushing pretty hard here. I'm bending those bristles, moving and blending that color. The harder you push, the more it blends. And then if you go over it very lightly, that's how we take out all those pesky little brush marks. There it is, a little edit there where I blended it. Some of these videos that I did of my 5 painting in one day extravaganza is I walked away from the painting for a little while. So once in a while there you're going to see an edit where it just where I stopped the camera and started it back up. So putting in these crazy foothills, I've got this purple color I created definitely to the red side of purple. Tapping it in there, and now with a cleaner brush, look how I just bring some of that color down to fill it in. Now I'm starting to feather it again, darkest at the top, and let it fade into the misty bottom. So that's what I'm trying to do here, tapping back and forth. And doing the lift. 10,000 treetops or so. I might be a couple off. definitely this is something that you can play around with multiple times and get it just right for your needs. I believe at this point I'm adding a little bit more blue to my purple and even adding a touch of green. Many, many, many different variations you can try here, of course. Load that right onto your 1-inch brush and, well, here I go. Look at that, kind of greenish, bluish color, not quite teal, but tapping, tapping, just getting an interesting shape out there. Now this is a much bigger foothill. There's just more mass, more volume, more area. Oh, I'm not sure which the math term we want there. So it's just going to take a lot of tapping. Got to cover up that previous foothill a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if I added a little more paint to my brush just to darken some of that. There we go. Still playing around, adding just the smallest amount of color. I didn't really want to darken it too much. Really wanted to, I needed some paint in the brush. Want to make sure you have the right amount in the brush. All right, I'm counting. I'm up to about 8,250 trees. Added, there it is. I added a little bit more color and look how it darkens it just a bit. And it turns that second closer foothill possibly into two. And we do need a little bit of color to make reflections. So a little extra tapping just to get some of that excess paint out of my brush. And you see I immediately go in there and create that nice illusion here. Very light this time. The reflections aren't like mirror images. But if you still don't have enough paint in your brush or paint on the canvas to move into reflections, you can always just add a touch. Well, looks like we're just adding in the bottom part of our water here. Probably could have done that a little earlier when I was doing all the sky, but it doesn't really matter so much. You figure out what color you want there. Now with a cleaner brush, we soften our reflection vertically and then very lightly brush across it horizontally or sideways. Blur it. And with just a little bit of the liquid white, Get it up there on the edge of your knife and saw sideways. With all that we have going into the foreground here, you don't have to overdo this waterline. Yeah, I'm taking a little extra time here, but we still want it to remain subtle if possible. All right, I've mixed together a whole bunch of dark color. You know how Bob does it here, and Nick does it, and then me. We just find some really dark paint. How you want to create that dark paint? Well, you got lots of options. You know, if you have a lot of that purple left, as long as there's no white in it, the alizarin crimson and either of the blues to make a super dark purple, add a little bit of brown and green. If you instead, you could add midnight black, brown, touch of green, either sap green or phthalo green. You know, just looking for a nice dark color. Bob's Mountain Mix that the Bob Ross Company just put into a tube is a great one. It's a super dark blue, like more blue, more black than blue. You know, it's a really dark color of Bob's original mixes. You add a little green to that mountain mix, and you get these great shades for evergreens. So a little tappy tap just to create a guideline for you, a little center line. And you hold that brush over to the right and a little low, a little below level. See that? You just want to be able to tap and put a little color right there on the top of that line. And then I start tapping, bending those bristles, tapping in, allowing the bristles to bend, and it makes this little branch shape for you. Notice how I'm using basically the same stroke for both sides of this tree. You don't have to worry about it too much. You just start getting into a little rhythm and figure out what color works, but or I'm sorry, you know, what shape is working, what angle is working. Looks like we need a third partner in crime here. Let that tree just sort of fade right off. We don't know where it ends. Somewhere a couple inches to the right, I think, by the time you get to the bottom. Now that I've got the basics out there, I like to come back and figure out the angle and add something here or there to make it look a little more natural. Then again, just leaving it all kind of wacky crazy looks natural as well. Pushing up on my 1 inch brush, same mountain color, just really bending those bristles. Look how it creates the illusion of all those little sticks and twigs poking up. We're just looking for some dark color. The rest of that can just be filled in. The more you work it, you can see when I'm running out of paint there, it starts mixing with that liquid white. It keeps getting lighter and lighter. We don't have to worry about it that much. Just as long as it's relatively dark, you should be good to go. Now I thin down a little bit. That's one of those fast cuts again. I thin down a little bit of that cadmium yellow, added some sap green, maybe a little bit of Indian yellow or yellow ochre to dull that green. Plenty of paint. Look at that light touch. Just barely touching. And if you happen to see, I'm using the middle section of that fan brush now, making all these beautiful little frowns. No need to turn, the brush, twist it from side to side. Just moving my arm, letting that color come off. Oh, one more. It looks like I just needed the one more right there. Looks like I changed the color a little bit. I darkened it little bit more to the green side on this one. You could add more green, or you could dull it with some of the mountain mixture. Look at that. Starting to see highlights coming all the way down this tree as well. We only have the big tree to go. On these big trees, I definitely have to load that brush more often. I'm putting so much paint on there so that it sticks with a very light touch. But that paint comes off quickly, and sometimes it takes a little bit of reloading. I know Bob liked to do almost the whole tree with one brush full of highlight, but I'm not Bob. I gotta reload sometimes to get it to where I like it. Slight lull here. Must not have edited this part down. And apparently I need a brighter color again. So I'm going to put a little bit of extra highlight on a couple of these branches just to make it sparkle. Want to be pretty sporadic with these. Now, lots and lots of paint. I should have showed a better version of this, but it's where Bob is pulling through that paint with some liquid white in it. Lots of paint on the brush, just right up through the tips of the bristles. You can see I'm just gently pressing, somewhat leading with the top corner of the brush, just a little bit. You need a lot of paint in your brush to do this trick, to make it look lacy. There we go. That's a little better version of it. That first bush wasn't so great. I've done better. So, putting a couple of shapes here, change the color, make another little bush shape. Having that dark color in there, doesn't that automatically look like shadows? I think I have changed the color a little bit so we can have just one or two more of these bushes. Ooh, got a little sparkler. So building our way into the foreground, we're going to have a little bit of exposed rock, a little bit of earth, perhaps. So just a little Van Dyke brown on the palette knife and just sort of rubbing some color on there. As long as it's dark, it's good. And what makes a great highlight color is just white with a touch of brown in it, or in this case, a touch of dark sienna. And just like snow on the mountain, just barely touching, barely grazing that paint. Adds such a very, very effective texture there. Now, it looks like I'm going to take my fan brush, load it up with some color, and start pushing upwards, making some smashy grass. And this here is important that you work your way forward. You know, you want a little bit of that color pushing up. And if you start to work your way up, you kind of ruin that overlapping effect. So right now I'm just adding some extra dark color. Apparently what I put on the canvas before the path wasn't quite dark enough. So here's like extra shadows. Already looks very textured. And one of the things about this, you don't need a lot of paint. You know, it starts to react a little blotchy if you have too much paint in the brush. And this part takes a little practice to feel it. You gotta have the right color, the right consistency, the right angle, the right pressure. But when it starts to work, that's when you hit it. That's when you go for it and just fill this scene up. Sometimes when you're pushing really hard, the paint kind of pushes to the back side of the brush. So once in a while, you'll see me to flip the brush over, hit it a little harder, and you got more in the brush than you think. There it goes. I think a boulder would have looked nice here if I would have made more of a rounded shape with that brown. We could have had some fun. Okay, a roll of the Van Dyke Brown on the knife, and I'm doing it Bob's upside down tricky, tricky technique. Just touching and pulling to the side just a little bit, put out that dark color. And it's okay if it's not solid all the way through. Sometimes getting just overly concerned about making sure everything is the darkest it can be, can cause happy accidents. So I'm not too worried as I'm doing this. You can clean it up a little bit when you're doing the right side. That first step there, going all the way up, was cleaning up and the left side. So there we go. We want it a little wider at the bottom. Trying not to play around too much. Now, mixing a little bit of that brown into white, maybe even a touch of dark sienna. And this is sort of the birch tree technique, but just one side of the tree here, putting a highlight across the left side. This is another technique where subtlety is the watchword. You highlight it up, but try not to go overboard with it. And a little extra bright stuff just on like that middle section there, just where the light is zinging extra bright. Here's me getting overly concerned about that right edge. Cover a little bit of the foot there. Almost looks like I put in a little flower by tapping that 1 inch brush there. I think it's time for branches. Thinning that paint down so it really, really flows out of the liner brush. Here we go. There it is. Just sort of clean up the top edge there. Pulls it right on off the seam. And today we're doing these little pull downs, downs and outs. And as I go down, I go out a little further. I struggle sometimes putting the right amount of branches or trying to follow the pattern that I was going for here. But using Nix as an example here, I thought I did a halfway decent job. Um, Sometimes I go a little too far out, too far up at the top. I really want this to look, well, basically like an evergreen here, narrow at the top and wider at the bottom. trick is with these branches, I have learned a trick or two. Try not to go over the same spot. That's probably the best trick right there. Depending on how much paint thinner you have in your brush, if you do try to go over it too many times, it starts to melt right down to the canvas. Adding a lot of detail to this one, all these little tiny shaggy things coming off. Couple couple of these I wish I would have done better. A little too squiggly there at the bottom, but there, look at me. Oh, speak of the devil. Here I am trying to strengthen up the color. It looked a little transparent. Maybe too much paint thinner made it a little too light of a branch. And here I am doing stuff I want to warn you about doing. Messing around with the same ones, and here I am going over them, trying to darken them. Doesn't always go well. It looks like I cleaned mine up a little bit, but it could have easily gone the wrong way. Okay, some of what I've seen Nick's famous little cattails. So, just like making branches, this time more of a flipping motion with the brush. You create some nice little stalks, change the color a little bit, but watch this, just touch. It's just a press down, that's it. Makes the top of the cattail. Sort of an all or nothing. It's a bravery test. It was a tricky one getting those cattails in. And now just moving over to my bright red, give it a little signature, and that's it. Thanks all.